And we are live with today's 2/20/11/02 Core 2 A+ study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our pre-show. I am in the middle of making sure that everything is working as expected. I did a few software upgrades to the streaming service, which makes me remarkably uncomfortable. So we're going to see how well that works. So far, it's been working okay. So I'm very happy with its performance so far. Recordings are going. You can see my Cylons down here. And I also have up our map of the world where you can put your virtual push pin into the map by using the link that you will use for the rest of this live stream, professormesser.com/QA. Let's do a quick check. Let's get the other camera up. 1, 2, 3. There it is. Let's get all of that here. I think we're in pretty good shape. We are so ready to give you all of these new questions. I've been working on the new content. As you know, every study group, we have a new set of questions. So I create a new set. So it should be interesting. Hello, chat room. How's everybody doing? Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot to go through today. I'll do another quick check of audio. Looks good. There's not much to change on the audio side. I want to be making some updates to the audio, so we'll figure it out. Is this the date and time for all of your study groups? No, just this one. It's the date and time for this one. Date and time. You can always check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll know exactly when the next live stream will be over the next month or so. I usually update it and keep about a month out or so. If all is going well, we will see what happens. A lot to go through today. We got a lot going on here. There's always something happening here. There's never a dull moment. If I am in the middle of writing something or planning for a live stream, it's so good because the live stream stuff is kind of breaks up all of the things that I'm working on, which makes it kind of fun. We got a lot to go through. Also, in the after show, I will be taking your questions. So if you have a question you want to hear me address in the after show, you can always use the same link on your screen, the one that's right here behind me, professormesser.com/QA. This is the pre-show. For those of you wondering, this is not the live stream yet. You don't just look at the back of my head the whole time. You will eventually see me. There will be a moment, some time, as I check through some of these videos. Got folks that are checking in from all over the place. Anthony is in Minneapolis. I'm assuming the one in Minnesota. Is there another Minneapolis? Maybe that's it. But how's the weather here? The weather here is good. What is the temperature here in the state of Florida? I'm in the central part of the state. And right now, as we sit here, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not bad. I think it's going to be 80 today, 80. See, there's a Minneapolis in Kansas. Yeah, I grew up in Monticello, and there's a Monticello everywhere. There's a Monticello, Georgia. There's a Monticello, New York. There's a Monticello, Virginia. You got a lot of Monticellos. Although technically, I guess, in Virginia, it's Monticello. Ironically, in Florida, it's supposed to be Monticello, but it was never called that. Literally, in Jefferson County, Florida, is the city Monticello, which was named after the city or the homestead of Jefferson, President Jefferson, in Virginia, but we don't call it Monticello. We call it Monticello. See, there's a Monticello, Minnesota. See, Anthony and I have absolutely linked together in a completely different universe. That's how it works. Yeah, it was 60-something this morning. It's warmed up a bit into the 70s. It'll be 80 today. It's a beautiful day outside. We got a lot to work on. Lot of things we could be doing. I'm in the middle of doing just tons of editing. Editing. So there's a lot of video happening right now. Lots and lots of video. Well, now we got about 5 minutes before we get started. We will be going through Q&A in that first hour. I'll be taking your questions in the second hour. If you have anything that you want to go through, questions, ideas, thoughts, suggestions, now's the time. Or as you're thinking of it, just go to the link on your screen at any time during the live stream. There's a tab at the top and you could submit a question anytime you'd like. We'll figure it out. As I was going through, I'm going to try to make some additional changes. This is like owning a boat where you're constantly spending money. It's just going into nowhere. So I'm planning to do some other things with the audio chain here over the next week or so. I think I have to do some testing when this is over and test some of the delay capabilities of my mixer. I have a relatively new mixer added to this. It's very colorful, isn't it? Lots of colors. I could do without that, but there it is. It's a new mixer. It's a Mackie mixer, the DLZ. What do they call this one? The DLZ. I need my light. Anyone? Creator. Boy, that's dusty. And we have to dust when this is over as well. Clear the dust off. But the DLZ Creator is it's a new mixer, and I want to implement that or integrate it into, or more integration into the live streams. And to do that, I need to adjust delay capabilities. For those of you that have ever worked with video and audio at the same time, you know that most of the things that are processing video take additional processing time versus processing audio. Video is much more complex. It takes more CPU cycles. And so anytime you're rendering or you're doing a live stream, it's very difficult it's almost impossible with nothing else to sync up the video with the audio, unless you're doing them both at the same time. And as you get more complex environments, you more often than not are separating those things out. So the video is going through one chain, the audio is going through another chain, and they meet up. The audio and video that you're seeing are together, and there's some benefit to doing that in the mixer itself. But I can't adjust the audio coming out of that. So that's one of the challenges. So I need to break out the audio, adjust it a little bit, and then send it over to YouTube. That's what I'm working on. So that's my next big project. It sounds like a simple thing. Of course it isn't. It always is the project that begets the project that begets the project. Why is there Mac in my equipment setup versus a PC? I used to do everything on a PC, and I just could not stop the PC from rebooting randomly on random days or random nights to do an update. I would tell it, no, I am rendering overnight. Do not do anything. Do not stop. Do not turn off. Do not reboot. And it would say, well, we don't really care what you think. We're rebooting. So I'd leave my studio, go to bed, wake up in the morning ready for all of these renders, these batch renders to have occurred over the nighttime period. And right after I left the studio, it rebooted, and this was sitting there. So I wasted a whole night of nothing. And that's when I set my Windows machine on fire. Like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. That's a huge waste of my time. Let's get an operating system that I control for a change. And that ended up being Mac OS. So that's the short story on how I ended up going to Mac. It wasn't that I necessarily wanted to go get a Mac OS, but I was kind of forced into it. Windows decided that I should do that. So I did. Why not Linux? I needed an operating system that works. That's why. No, that's not fair. I was really just trolling there for the emails. I look forward to your cards and letters. Why not Linux? Because I'm doing tons of video editing, tons of graphics editing, a lot of content creation, and Linux is not made for any of those things. Clearly, there are much better options. Can you do some editing in Linux? Sure. Can you do some video stuff in Linux? Yes, you can. Is it any good? Not really. It's not. When you compare it to other things, when you compare it to Windows, when you compare it to Mac OS, it is lagging behind. Now, if you need it for a service, for example, if you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, I got tons of Linux there. We got Linux web servers. I got Linux database servers. I got Linux caching servers. I got Linux everywhere. And I manage and maintain all of those. But for what we're doing here, Mac OS 1, they're the winners, at least at the moment. So that's why. Thank you for letting me kill a couple minutes there while we're waiting at the top of the hour, which is happening right now. This is our top of the hour. I should probably get things in order here. Let's turn this now into our Keynote front end. I'm looking for a green light. We got the green light. I got a notification that I'm doing a live stream, which is even better. So now, why don't we do a live stream, everybody? Let's get this thing started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2025 Professor Messer 2201102. That is the Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And we get to see just how well you know some of those objectives. That's the real question, isn't it? How well do we know this information? Fortunately, if you are here live, you can join us and follow along with us and vote on what you think the right answer might be. The way that you do that is you pop open a new browser window and you head over to professormesser.com/QA. And that will take you right to where you need to be. There'll be in fact, I will put a question there right now. If you go over to professormesser.com/QA, that professormesser.com/QA question that's coming up is one that you may recognize. It's a question that we refer to as our rewind question because it is a question that we did in a previous study group. If that makes any sense. Now, before we get to the question, let me remind you that we would like you to answer by visiting the URL that we have right here, professormesser.com/QA. That's where you put in your questions, your answers, anything that you want to interact with these questions. That's where you do it. Please do not put any answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. It's kind of our standing rule as we go through this. The question that I have that hopefully you remember a little bit if you were here last month, otherwise it's new to you. The question asks, a Windows administrator has configured an alternate configuration. Which of the following would be the result of this configuration? Would that be IP addressing when the DHCP server is unavailable, data availability if a single drive in an array fails, a list of operating systems to choose from during startup, multiple monitors on a single system, or a list of available languages on the Windows desktop? That is the question and the series of possible answers I would like you to choose from. As I mentioned, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. If you would like to answer, visit this URL at professormesser.com/QA. Well, before we get to the answer in that, we will come back to the answer on that one. Let's talk about all the things that we're doing here. We want to thank you, of course, for joining us, for carving out a little bit of time on your day to sit with us and do some Q&A and maybe learn a little bit about Core 2. But of course, we're not doing this 24/7. You can always find us over on our YouTube channel where I'm posting a lot of A+ videos right now. If you'd like to keep track and be informed when we upload those, I have a bunch that I'm going to upload today. For example, if you'd like to know when that happens, go to professormesser.com/YouTube, subscribe to our channel, click the bell and the notification feature so you will know when those videos appear online. We also have our daily A+ pop quiz questions available on the service formerly known as Twitter, that many of us still call Twitter, or X. You can go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X. We also create those questions in a pretty picture version over on the gram. You'll find it at professormesser.com/Instagram. Sounded awful. We won't do that anymore, I promise. And of course, we've got other places you can go for social media, professormesser.com/LinkedIn, and other spots as well. Just type in your favorite social media site at the end of our URL and see what happens. And if we're not there and you want us to be there, drop a note and I'll be glad to have a look. We'll certainly step through those. Sometime during the first hour of this live stream, I will give you information on how you could earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's the Continuing Education Unit credit. This is for you people that are already certified or you need to collect some type of continuing education for anything that you may be doing. Just listen in sometime during this first hour, and I'll give you all of the instructions on how you can earn that. Today, we're going to talk about questions that come from the 220-1102 exam. This is a series of exams, the 1101 and 1102, that were released in April of 2022. And the time frame for these videos is about 6 months away, just under now. It's September 25th of this year. Of course, we are sitting here in April, but on September 25th, those two exam versions will be retired. They will go away. They will disappear. So we'll talk about what some of your options might be if you're not able to complete your certification studies before September. This exam, the A+ Core 1 and Core 2 exam, you have to pass both of those to become A+ certified. Each one of those exams is 90 minutes in length. To pass the 1101 exam, the Core 1, you need a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. And if you are taking the Core 2, like the topics we'll be discussing today, you need to do a little bit better. You need to earn a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. The exam itself consists of both multiple choice questions and performance-based questions, and you will get both of those in our live stream today. Well, I mentioned that this 1101 and 1102 are retiring on September 25th. Well, if they're retiring, what does that leave us with? Oh, I'm glad you asked, because this next slide shows all the information about the newer version of the A+ exam, the 1201 and the 1202. You'll often hear me refer to this as the 1100 series and the 1200 series. The 1200 series exams were released about 2 weeks ago on March 25th, or a week ago. Now it's 2 weeks ago on March 25th. This is a set of exams because this was just released. We expect these will stick around and are not going to retire until September of 2028 or somewhere around there. The exact requirements for passing these exams is the same as the previous version. So it's 90 minutes, a 675 for the, I put the wrong numbers there. We're going to do this live, everybody. Watch what happens. We're going to do 1201, and we want to change this to a 1202. Now it's accurate. Don't you love a live stream, everybody? So the scores are exactly the same as what we have now. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is that there's not a lot of study materials out on the market right now because these new exams were just released. So relative to the previous exams, very little study materials are available, but there are some. And of course, we are putting out tons of videos right now. So that in about 3 months from now, you'll probably see the market change quite a bit, and we can sort of revisit where we are and what we're thinking. If you are studying right now for your 1100 series, keep studying. You have until September, and quite honestly, it doesn't matter which one of these you pass, you earn the same certification. So there's really no pressing need or requirement for you to shift gears and change your study habits to a different version of the exam, especially if you've already invested in study materials, you've already gone through a number of the study materials, you're already working on a certain version of the exam. Keep doing that. There's no reason to stop what you're doing there. And if you have other questions about the two exams and what's different and what to expect, you can always leave me a note by going to professormesser.com/QA, and I'll be glad to have a look at those questions in their second hour, what we call our after show. The exams themselves, the Core 1 and the Core 2, are listed here. We're going to talk about Core 2 today. So the questions that we will look at are questions regarding operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. We'll step through probably all of those categories at some point during this live event. Of course, we have a live video replay of this available immediately afterwards. I hit the stop button and YouTube automatically renders it, takes a couple of minutes, and you can watch it right away on our YouTube channel. But some of you would like an audio version so that you can take it with you when you're in the car, or you would like to listen when you're working out, and you don't need that video front end. One of the ways to do that is through our podcast version of the replay. You can either find that at professormesser.com/podcast, or go to your favorite podcast index. We're probably in there. You might even be on a streaming audio service like Spotify. If that's the case, just simply search for Professor Messer and you'll find all of our podcasts there as well. What could be easier? And if we're not on your favorite podcast listening service, just let me know. I'll see about adding it to that particular service as well. I mentioned that the video replay will be available on YouTube immediately after this event is over. And if you wait about a day, you'll notice that the YouTube video description has a bunch of timestamps in it. Those timestamps are there thanks to my folks that are Lori, my marketing manager. Hi, Lori. She's watching and listening this and going through the details of this and trying to understand what I am saying and when I am saying it so she can put timestamps in. So far, I think she's done a tremendous job on our previous live streams, and this one will probably be just as stellar. So have a look at that. If you're watching this and you notice those YouTube video descriptions are there, that's because Lori has already been there. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. When we are not here doing a live stream, you can always go here to what we are doing on this side on our Discord. Our Discord server is where we can meet to chat, to share our study sessions. I have an entire system set up where you can open up your own room inside of our Discord, create your own training room, do whatever you would like for that training room. And then when everybody leaves the room just magically disappears. What could be easier? You can join that Discord and thousands of other folks who are studying for their A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. Also, at some point, you will need to take the A+ exam, and the A+ exam does have a cost associated with it, but I might be able to decrease that cost just a little bit for you because on my site, I have a set of discounted vouchers. That means that you could go to the CompTIA site and pay full price, or you could come to my site and get a discount that's already built into the price you see on our webpage. This is for folks who are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. Unfortunately, I don't have vouchers outside of that particular geography. And if you purchase the voucher on my site, not only are you getting a discount, but you're also going to get something that no one else can provide, and that's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook I wrote that has tips and tricks on how you can study and tips and tricks on things you can do during the exam to increase your ability to earn points. That's something that you might desperately want or need as you are going through these. So make sure you are having a look at that. There's plenty of options there, and it might be something you can use. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers for more information on those. Well, we have a lot more to step through whenever we are working through the details of this. So let's go back to the question we had earlier, which was a Windows administrator has configured an alternate configuration. Which of the following would be the result of this configuration? Would it be IP addressing when the DHCP server is unavailable, data availability if a single drive in an array fails, a list of operating system to choose from during startup, multiple monitors on a single system, and a list of available languages on the Windows desktop? Let's find out which one you chose in this mix. We'll stop our poll, and we can see that 68% of you say the answer is IP addressing when the DHCP server is unavailable. 26% of you, though, almost a quarter, just over, say a list of operating system to choose from during the startup process. We also have 3% that say multiple monitors on a single system, 3% say a list of available languages on the Windows desktop, and then only 1% said drive availability if a single drive in an array fails. So if you are somebody who has answered in that 68%, that's certainly a large percentage. IP addressing, an alternate configuration, you're saying is IP addressing when the DHCP server is unavailable. I mean, if you were here last month, you would know, yep, that's exactly what it is. This is where you can have DHCP servers on your network, but what if you're on a network that doesn't have a DHCP server? And if that happens, you would like it to automatically provide a set of IP configurations. And you can set that up as an alternate configuration. It is literally a tab that you can find in the properties of your IP config. This allows you to have it act one way when DHCP server is available, and maybe act a different way if you're on a network where DHCP is not available. Maybe at work it has one config, and if you take the laptop home, it's a different config. You've got options there. So this is where you can really focus on customizing the IPv4 config, regardless of what network configuration you might find yourself in. That is the right answer. IP addressing when the DHCP server is unavailable is one of the many things that an alternate configuration can do for you, and that is the only one of these 5 options that makes any sense as it relates to alternate configuration. 26% of you said a list of operating systems to choose from during startup. That is a different set of configurations with the boot configuration data, the BCD data, and your boot front end. Maybe you even have a different boot manager that lists out different operating systems like Linux, Windows, and other types of operating systems on your system, but that has nothing to do with an alternate configuration. 3% of you said multiple monitors on a single system, also not related to an alternate configuration, more of the normal display settings on your computer. A list of available languages on the Windows desktop. There are some nice options on the Windows desktop to define what languages you will be using. But that is not what an alternate configuration is. And 1% of you said data availability. If a single drive in an array fails, that is referring, of course, to RAID, a redundant array of independent disks. And in that particular scenario, you do want to have RAID, but it has nothing to do with an alternate configuration. The answer we wanted is the one that 68% of you chose, IP addressing when the DHCP server is unavailable. Well, I think we are now in our Q&A. You've been able to get in and work through having an understanding of what the options are for locking in your answers, for looking at the answers online. So far, everything seems to be working exactly as we would hope. So what I have for you is now a new question. As many of you know, when you are starting your A+ exams, the first series of questions you get on your exam are not multiple choice. The question we just did was a multiple choice question. There was one single question, and there were answers that you could choose from. So for this question, there were 5 answers, which means even if you didn't know the answer, you could guess. And you could guess, you get a 20% chance of guessing absolutely correct. CompTIA, however, wants to really see if you know your stuff. So at the beginning of these exams, they will ask you questions that are not multiple choice. In fact, they're anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. Maybe it's a drag and drop question. Maybe you have to choose from a menu. Maybe you have to put things in a particular order. It's lots of different ways that questions could be posed, but all of the questions they will ask are specific to the different options and objectives that are available in CompTIA's official exam objective list. So the good part is, as long as you know the objectives, really doesn't matter how they ask the question. You will know how to answer it. Really, they're just trying to make sure you really know this information instead of simply choosing something from a list. So I have for you today a performance-based question, a brand new performance-based question, as we always do. This one I made a little bit harder than usual, so don't worry if it seems like it's a lot. We will step through it step by step so that we can really understand what the options are. The question I have for you is this one. I have a question that is asking you to provide the appropriate Windows command. And I have 5 different things on the screen, and I want you to tell me what would you type in at this prompt to be able to perform these particular commands. So for those of you listening in, let me go through all 5 of these different commands. There's a lot on the screen here. So the first command I want you to do is to determine the name of the local computer. Just tell me what command you would use for that. The next one is associate drive H to the share public on server 7. That's the name of the server, is server 7. The next one I'd like you to tell me is to determine the number of hops to 1.1.1.1. which is a set of services that are at Cloudflare. That's not important. The important part is you tell me, how do we determine how many hops it is to reach that particular IP address? Next one is check the current OS patch level. There's one command we can type that would tell me what the current patch level is of this local Windows machine. And lastly, tell me how you would replace any corrupted or modified system files with just one of those options. So those are your 5 different commands. If you think you know what these are, please don't answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to submit your answer. This is one where you will need to type in the answer right there on the screen to tell me what it does. Maybe we'll even try some of these on my Windows desktop as we are stepping through it. These are commands that you would probably commonly use when you are working through troubleshooting a problem. And so I tried to pick some of these commands that would be very easy. Some of these are simply one command you type in, you hit enter. There's no extra options. There's no flags. There's no additional slash options that you would add to it. Just type in the command, you hit enter. Some of these, though, have multiple options you have to put in. So you do have to know what that type of syntax is for the exam. Hopefully you are familiar with what some of the syntax might be for some of these, or some of these quick commands that you might be able to use. This is also a pretty common type of performance-based question, because CompTIA would like to see if you can take a problem or challenge or something you need to do and actually perform that task at the command line. Unfortunately, unlike the real exam, here you cannot type in the help command to get any help. Fortunately, on the real exam, many of these performance-based questions allow you to type help, H-E-L-P, and hit enter, and it will tell you the available commands that you have. Maybe that's a little tip for you that might help you during the exam to prompt or to fire off a couple of extra synapses there, and maybe it can remind you what the possible answers are. Many of you have worked on submitting your answers right now. You can tell I'm talking a little bit more than I normally do because I'm looking at the total number who have submitted answers to this one, and now it's rapidly going up. We've spent some time typing those commands in. Maybe you've even tried some of these on your computer before sending them on their way, which technically cheating, but I think I could allow that during our study group, right? This is not an actual exam. This is a chance where we get to try things and we get to see if what we are doing or what we think we are doing is the right answer to these questions. So I'm not too wrapped up in those types of pieces. Let's step through each one of these commands, and I'll tell you the command that I would use for this, and you can tell me if you would use a different command to be able to make this happen. There's obviously, in many cases, more than one way to gather this information, but I'm really looking for the best way to gather it. I know I didn't put that in the instructions. That really is what we were hoping to do. So let's step through these commands one at a time and see what we can come up with. The first one is to determine the name of the local computer. This is one of those commands that is almost apparent, obvious, and easy to run if you can remember what the command is. So this command is determining the name of the local computer, hostname. That's what it does. That's what that command is. Let's see if I can get a host name to work on my computer. I'm going to bring over my Windows 11 configuration here, and let's bring up a CMD on this one. There it is. That's very small, but I'll zoom up on it a little bit so we could see. There it is. And the command we would use would be hostname. And if you spell it right and just hit enter, there you go. You get the name of the host. Now, this particular Windows computer has a very, very different name than you would expect. It's obvious. Professor Messer is the name of this server, the name of this device that I'm running as a service. So I could have named it Server 7. I could have named it Odyssey. I could have named it anything. But the name of this device just so happens to be Professor Messer. So that hostname command does come in handy. Where this really helps is not really on this screen. We know we're on my Windows 7. We know there's this single command prompt up. So we really do know what machine we're working with. However, there are cases where you might have multiple windows up on your screen connected to multiple devices all over the world. So one of the things that you can do is to go into any of these windows and type hostname. Okay, that's the right one. Now I can type in the command to delete everything on this system now that I have confirmed that I'm really in the right window for this particular host. So although it's a simple command, it can really be a very, very important command as well. Next on our list is the question that asks. Here it is. This one is associate drive H to the share public on server 7. Now, this is one that has multiple steps. I mentioned that some of these are one-liners that are easy, like hostname, but some of these have multiple options you would have to put into the mix. This is one of those that does require multiple options. So if you wanted to associate drive H to the share public on server 7, the first thing you would need to know is the core command to make this work. And because this is a Windows type command over the network, we're performing a Windows or a Windows share. We're connecting to a Windows share. The command that we would use is net. And the command specifically would be net use. We want to use a share that is on the network. The net use command has two primary parameters that you will always use. There are a number of different parameters if you were to look at the help for net use. The first parameter you would put in is the drive letter that you would like to associate with the share that you are connecting to. So this is a good example of this. Since we're associating and wanting to use drive H for this, we would use net use H:. There you go. So anything after this will designate the server and the share that we would now, at this point, allocate to our H colon inside of our Windows system. The rest of this command is the standard naming convention for connecting to these services and shares over the network. And the nomenclature and the syntax for this is you have a double backslash server 7. That is the name of the server, double backslash in the name of the server, a single backslash in the name of the share. So there is where we would have that backslash server 7 is referring to the name of the server, a separate backslash, and at the end is the name of the share. In this case, the share name is public. So that is the entire name after all of this. Net use H colon and then backslash server 7 backslash public. And these spaces in these are pretty important. There's a space between net and use. There's a space between use and H colon. There's a space between H colon and the rest of this with those double backslashes, server 7 backslash public. So that is the entire net use command. Now, I was thinking as I was putting this one in, that's a lot that you have to remember, but we use this command so often to connect to different shares over the network that you've got to become familiar with the net use command. It's a very important command, and it is in your official CompTIA exam objectives. Yet another good reason to know that one. Let's do this next command, which asks, determine the number of hops to 1.1.1.1. So this one in the Windows world is a command. You might already be thinking, well, that's a trace route. But how do you do a trace route in Windows? It's trace RT, because trace route is more than 8 characters, and to maintain that 8-character limitation that is still dogging us from the DOS days, we do that as well, trace RT, to be able to do that. And then you put a space and then the device that you would like to run a trace route to across the network. So you can do that to this 1.1.1.1, and it will run through this entire configuration. I'm not going to show you the trace route on my side because I don't want to show you any information about the ISP setup and the connectivity that I'm using on that ISP, but you're welcome to pop open a command line prompt on your computer and step through, just type in trace RT space 1.1.1.1. This doesn't affect your local computer, doesn't have anything to do with the files that are on your local system. This will simply send information across the network and tell you hop by hop by hop what the IP addresses are to reach that particular location. So that will tell you how many hops. It will tell you the IP address of each hop. And by default, it will even perform that test 3 times so you can get a different idea of response times to that hop as well. So that's an important command. If you're troubleshooting networks, knowing how to ping and knowing how to run a trace route can be very, very, very valuable. So make sure you're familiar with that one. Next on our list is the command that asks you to check the current OS patch level. This is one that is another one-liner, one command with no extra features, and it's WinVer. That's an unusual one. In fact, the way that it works is kind of unusual. There's different ways to do this as well, but in fact, there's a nice Windows command that can do this at the command prompt, but I'm sticking to the list of commands you need to know from the exam objectives. So on my Windows command, if I did a WinVer, normally when you type these commands in, you're expecting these commands to show up in the command prompt, but it doesn't. It pops open the About screen for Windows. So you can see which version of Windows that we're running. In fact, it shows you right there, we're running 21H2 OS build 22000.2538. That's the version we're running. So anytime you run a WinVer, it just pops open that window, which is kind of weird. It's a little unusual. Thank you for the advertising inside of Windows. People were asking in the pre-show, why are you not using Windows as your primary computer? And the more I use it, the more it's obvious why that's not the case. Next on our list, the last one on our list, is the command that asks, replace any corrupted or modified system files. This is a good one to know because if you are working in an operating system that has been in some way modified, there's been a file that was replaced, an upgrade didn't go well, or perhaps it was infected with malware and you feel that malware might have changed some of your core system files, you can run a command that checks all of those core files. And if any of those files have been changed, if anything is modified, if anything is different than the original installation, you would use the SFC command, System File Checker. I wish you could just type in System File Checker, then you would know what that does. No, it's SFC, and if you wanted to scan your system, you'd put a /scan now, all one word. Scan now, all one word. I know, I didn't write the command. I'm just telling you what it is. SFC is also very, very useful. It's one of those commands that most of the time your system files are fine. Nothing has modified them. You can run this SFC and with the scan now, and it tells you nothing bad happened to your core system files, so we aren't going to do anything. And most of the time, it's a pretty boring command to run. But occasionally, you will find yourself in a situation where something has been modified, where malware got on the system, where something didn't work quite right. And SFC/scan now actually fixes something. And you reboot the computer and everything's running again. It's almost like magic when it happens. So it's one of those commands that you often don't expect to work, but when it does work, it's remarkable in what it's able to provide for you. So SFC is the command you need to remember, System File Checker, and the option for SFC to actually perform the scan and replace any corrupted files is the /scan now, all one word, SCANNOW. Those are the 5 commands I was hoping you'd be able to run based on what I'm seeing in the chat and based on what some of the things that were submitted on my side. You guys did a really good job of knowing what these different commands are. I'm sort of flipping through. A lot of people got the net use, by the way. Well done with that one. That's one you'll probably use more than any of these others. That's the one I think I've probably used more than any of the others. But you certainly have different options here, and hopefully you've got a feel now for some of the things that CompTIA wants you to know at the command prompt. This is only 5 different commands. There are a lot of commands listed in the exam objectives. Make sure you are familiar with all of them, that you can sit at the command prompt, that you can type these in. And I specifically made my video on these commands so that it would give you a way to do the same thing on your screen as I am doing it. So that's another thing that might help you, is to go through those videos. And as I am typing, you can type those things as well. So hopefully that gives you something to work on. Those are some great commands. Now, some folks were even saying, I was choosing check disk for this last one. CHKDSK is check disk. Again, shortened down to 6 characters. The check disk command is great for checking the logical file system of your computer, making sure that NTFS is set up and configured and working as it should, and that there are no corruptions to the file system. The file system is very similar to a table of contents that is in a book with a table of contents. So whenever we're looking for a file on our system, it looks in the table of contents, which is your file table that is in the file system that you're using. It finds where that is on your drive or your storage device, and then it goes to the storage device based on the information that it has. If any of that gets corrupted, then it will think your files are in a different place, or it won't know where your files are at all. So you can run check disk to be able to scan through your file system and make sure that the index that is there, the file table, and the files themselves are all properly represented and everything is up and synced up. But it does not replace any of your core system files. It doesn't touch the core Windows files unless they happen to be corrupted as part of your file system itself. And it tries to recover, but often it doesn't do a very good job of that either. SFC is a much better choice for this because it checks every system file, not just anything that could potentially be corrupted. It checks them all. And it's a great thing to use. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice question, shall we? Let's go to this question that asks, a user is moving a flash drive from a Windows computer to a Mac OS system. Which of the following file systems is the flash drive most likely using? Is it most likely using APFS, CDFS, ext4, NTFS, or exFAT? There's 5 different real file systems in this list. A user is moving a flash drive from a Windows computer to a Mac OS system. Which of the following file systems is the flash drive most likely using? Is it using APFS, CDFS, ext4, NTFS, or exFAT? Now, one of those is the right answer. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what these are. This might be also a good time to kind of look over this list and see if everything that you have in your exam objectives is one that is matching what you have here. So this is an important one to think about. As you are going through the details of your studies, you do have to know file systems, when those file systems are used, where those file systems are used, and when they would be most likely used, which is the question that we are using here. Which one is most likely the one that is being used for this? Hopefully you're familiar with these. A lot of people have locked in their answer. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, a user is moving a flash drive from a Windows computer to a Mac OS system. Which of the following file systems is the flash drive most likely using? Is it APFS, CDFS, ext4, NTFS, or exFAT? It's got to be something in this list, right? Let's see what you chose. We will stop our poll, and we can see that 61% say the answer is exFAT, 17% say it's NTFS, 14% say it's APFS, 7% say it's ext4, and only 1% said CDFS. And that's because I had to put something else into this mix. I ran out of file systems from our official exam objectives. So I had to add a file system from a previous version, something we probably don't even use any longer. Let's step through each one of these and understand what we're talking about, though. The file system that is probably the most likely is going to be based on a file system that has been around forever, it seems. The file allocation table. It's one that's been around since the 1980 timeframe. And the file allocation table has been updated through the years to provide additional functionality, to improve as our capabilities for storing information improved. For example, FAT32 was an update to FAT that allowed for 2 terabyte volume sizes. When are you ever going to have a drive with more than 2 terabytes on it, after all? And the maximum file size of 4 gigabytes. When would you ever use a file that's larger than 4 gig? Obviously, we have now far surpassed the capabilities of FAT32, which is probably why we don't see FAT32 used very much any longer. But there is a derivative of the file allocation table that was written specifically for flash drives, at least with flash drives in mind. It can be used for many types of storage devices, of course. It's a file system. You can apply it to anything, but it's really designed for these mobile flash drive type systems. You can have files that are larger than 4 gig on exFAT, and it works across many different operating systems natively, so you can plug it in and read and write to Windows, Linux, Mac OS on a storage device that has been formatted with exFAT, the extended file allocation table. Now, there are different operating systems that are compatible with different file systems, and this is one of the challenges you have as a technologist, is knowing which ones are compatible with which. And in this particular question, there was really more than one file system in this list is one that might work. For example, we had 17% of you that said NTFS. NTFS was a very good option, by the way. There's 17% of you that chose that one, because I could have a flash drive formatted with NTFS, plug it into my Windows machine, and it would be able to read and write to that flash drive. I could also take that flash drive and put it in Mac OS, and the most modern versions of Mac OS would be able to read that flash drive and read and write to that flash drive in most cases. There is the caveat, is in most cases. There may be things that you have configured as part of that file in NTFS, like encryption or additional, more advanced options that different operating systems may not know how to handle. NTFS is not a universal type of configuration across the board. NTFS is one that works really, really well with Windows, but it only works okay with other operating systems. So if you are moving documents, files, or other things between systems, you will probably want to use a file system that is completely compatible across all of those, and the one that is the most compatible, especially in this scenario where we have a flash drive. That was my comment to you to make you think about flash drives and how they are used. exFAT is a perfect example of what you would use. 61% of you chose that one. You got it absolutely right. Let's do another one. I want to see what my different options are. And by the way, there's the details for FAT if you wanted to have a look at that one, see what the different options are. Let's now go to this question that asks, which of the following would be the best way to ensure a user's Windows library is stored on a central file server? There's a lot of information in that single question. Is the answer format with a GUID partition table file system, connect to a virtual private network, configure NTFS permissions, enable EFS, or configure AD folder redirection? It's a lot of things to parse out for this question. The question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to ensure a user's Windows library is stored on a central file server? Would we format with a GUID partition table file system, connect to a virtual private network, configure NTFS permissions, enable EFS, or configure AD folder redirection? Do you think you know the answer? Submit your answer right here on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. I guess you don't submit it on this screen, but you look at that URL, it's on your screen, and then you go to that URL. And if you've already been answering questions, you're already on that page anyway. You just stay on that page, and that's the one where you would answer these questions. See if you know what these are. You know, I didn't go through those file systems in our previous question. We had a number of different file systems. There was NTFS we talked about. exFAT we obviously talked about. I had ext4, ext5 on there. That was for one of the Linux file systems, which really would not apply for Windows or Mac OS. Mac OS would recognize it. Windows would not. We had APFS, which is the Apple file system, Apple filing system. And obviously, Apple filing system is one specific to Apple. Windows would not be able to see the files that were on that flash drive. So that gives you some, and CDFS, which is not in your exam objectives, but I ran out of spots. That was the file system commonly associated with compact discs, optical drives, when obviously there's a less of a emphasis on optical drives these days, but it is still part of some of the exam information. But obviously, not a lot of people using optical drives these days. Sort of switched over to flash drives for something that's a lot faster and a lot more mobile to take with us. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be the best way to ensure a user's Windows library is stored on a central file server? Is it format with a GUID partition table file system? Is it connect to a virtual private network? Is it configure NTFS permissions? Should we enable EFS? Or should we configure AD folder redirection? Let's see how we did. 60% of you say the answer is to configure AD folder redirection. 15% of you, though, said configure NTFS permissions. And then we're down to single digits, although all three of these single digits are effectively a tie for third place with 9, 8, and 8%, which are format with a GUID partition table file system, connect to a virtual private network, and enable EFS. So if you are trying to get the Windows library on a central file server, first let's talk about Windows library. What in the world is a Windows library, after all? Well, to be able to know this, we have to go back to Windows. And if you look at your Windows file manager and be able to understand what's on that file manager, the Windows library is the section that has your desktop, your downloads, your music, your documents. You've seen these folders. on here. So you have all of these different folders that are on your system that could be used. Let me zoom up on this a little bit. So there it is, your start menu, your pictures, your music, your video, your favorites, your contacts. This is your Windows library, and it's specific to you. So each user has their own library. And when you store files in the library, let's say you store files in the download folder, you store files on your desktop, it stores them on your local machine in that folder. So it's usually under your users, professor, movies, users, professor, downloads, users, professor, desktop, that type of thing. Now, if you're on a network, though, we really don't want people storing all of these important documents on their local machine. We want all of that information stored on a server that is centralized on the network so that we can back everything up every night. But you don't want to tell people, just don't save it on your local machine, because they don't know what you mean there. And there's still a chance they could still store things on their local machine, which means when their local drive fails, we won't have a backup of their system. So one of the things you can do in Active Directory is you can easily go back and configure a folder redirection. That's what we would do, is look at a folder redirection. So folder redirections are very useful because we can take what is in one folder and send everything, effectively redirect it somewhere else. And if you're in Active Directory, you would do it into a folder that is out on the network. We're doing that in this case. We have some document properties, and you can see that the folder has been redirected to a central server named sgcad/users. We're putting all of our user documents on that particular server. And that is one where now we have an easy way that when people simply save things to their documents folder and they think they're storing it on their local machine, they're really storing it into a documents folder that's on a central server over the network. And now we can really manage these files in a more proper way. So that's what we were looking for, is the folder redirection. 60% of you chose folder redirection. You got that one absolutely right. 15% said to configure NTFS permissions. And although you often go into the NTFS permissions of a file to be able to modify, is it read-only? Can we set different access to this file? Maybe some people can write to the file, but other people can only read the file. And then other groups may be completely blocked from viewing anything about that document. But that doesn't change where the files are stored. It simply changes the properties and the permissions of that particular file. So it would not be configure NTFS permissions. We have 9% of you that said format with a GUID partition table file system. That's the GPT file system. The GUID partition table is one that many of us are using on our more modern computers, but it doesn't change where you are storing files. From a Windows library perspective, you would need to set up some type of folder redirection for that. 8% of you said use a VPN. VPN is only encrypting data over an encrypted tunnel that we're sending across the network. It doesn't change where files are stored. And enabling EFS might be something you do on your system. This is the encrypting file system. EFS is a function within NTFS that allows us to provide encryption to individual files or folders that are on a system. But encrypting the file doesn't change where you are storing the file. The only one of these that works, that changes where a Windows library is stored, is the Active Directory folder redirection. And 60% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is exactly the one you were looking to see. 60% of you got that one spot on. Did a great job there. This is a series of questions that you might get along the operating system Active Directory side. And of course, Core 2 exam has a lot of that. If you're watching this video, by the way, for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's the type of CEU that I will send you. To be able to earn the CEU, you must follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Click the link that says Contact Us. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put April 2025 Core 2. And then in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, configure AD folder redirection. Those are your super secret code words of the month. You can, of course, put anything else you would like in that email that's being sent to me. I do read through every single one of these, but all you have to put is the code words, and I'll know exactly what to do from that. It takes me about a week to turn these around, so keep checking your inbox, and I will be sending you back an email that has been digitally signed that has your certification that you are really here for this hour. For those of you that need to do this, the instructions again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put April 2025 Core 2 or something like that. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, configure AD folder redirection. And then I will know exactly what to do from there. Not a problem. But we do have some time left in the study group that we are doing right now in this first hour. Remember, of course, that we have a second hour coming up in a moment where I will be answering your questions. Before we get there, let me remind you that we have a lot of files in our training course. There are 137 videos in our A+ training course. And although I hope you are able to go through every single one of those, if you're not, you may want to consider getting our course notes. Our 220 1101 course notes and 1102 course notes have everything from every video in our study group or in our training course. In fact, I have a copy of it right here that I can show to you. This is what the course notes look like. This is the PDF version of the course notes. It has every bit of text from every presentation, all the important charts, all the important graphics. They are in this document. If you wanted a complete, a comprehensive, and a well-qualified set of notes, you really can't get better than this. We have them available not only for the 1100 series, but I also have a brand new set just released for the 1200 series. So it doesn't matter which version of the exam that you are looking to do. We've got options for you regardless. If you want to learn more about those, they're available to see out on my website. You can go to professormesser.com/1102 notes to be able to see if this is something that might help you a bit. Let's do more questions, though. I want to squeeze in a couple more here. This next question is this one that asks, a user has modified their date and time settings, and now the browser has stopped working. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a file system mismatch? Is it a certificate error? Is it a SQL injection? Is it a DDoS? Or is it a Defender false positive? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. The question again asks, a user has modified their date and time settings, and now the browser has stopped working. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a file system mismatch, a certificate error, a SQL injection, a DDoS, or a Defender false positive? Again, lock in your answer by visiting professormesser.com/QA. Would be the way to do it. Hopefully, this can give you some things to think about. All of these sound like bad things. So one of these bad things is the bad thing we are looking for. So there's other bad things. They cause other things to happen. There's other symptoms that will occur. We're looking specifically to match this system with the appropriate bad thing. Maybe you've run into this bad thing before, and you'll know what this one is right away. Have a look at this question. See if you know the answer. Plug it in right now. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in that answer. Let's see how you did on this one. The question again asks, a user has modified their date and time settings, and now their browser has stopped working. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a file system mismatch, a certificate error, a SQL injection, a DDoS, or a Defender false positive? Love to see what you chose for this one. Let's stop our poll and see what you selected. 75% of you say the answer is a certificate error. 17% of you, however, say the answer is a file system mismatch. And then we have 4% say DDoS, 2% say SQL injection, and 2% say Defender false positives. So those last three are way down there in the single digits. If we go with the majority on this one, and 75% is a pretty strong majority, you're saying that it is a certificate error. Boy, if you've run into this one, then you really know about this particular kind of certificate error. Now, commonly, we think about certificate errors as being a website that has forgotten to renew their certificates. And it's telling us that the certificate that's there is outdated, and maybe you should not trust it as much as you normally would. But there are other types of certificate errors, many other types of certificate errors. For example, this is one where the certificate date is invalid. In fact, the browser that I used for this error even told me, your clock is not right. This is not good. Your computer's date and time are incorrect. And because of that, it's not able to properly set up a certificate encryption conversation between you and the server. So this is one that really can be a significant problem. If you're trying to figure out really what's going on, maybe the browser you're using doesn't provide you with this level of detail, you may need to look at the certificate that is being pulled on the other side and have a real detailed look at the error. You'll notice if you look real close at the error, it does say net error cert date invalid. And that might lead you down the line of trying to understand, why is the date on the certificate invalid? Because the date that's on your computer is wrong. That's why. So this is a bit of a challenge if you are someone who is trying to troubleshoot systems like this and trying to break down where problems might be with certificates. As you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of problems you could run into with certificates. So if you ever want to try this, just change the date and time and then try to go to Google over an encrypted connection, and it will tell you pretty quick. Nope, can't do that. Sorry, you're going to have to fix your date and time. Another big reason why we really emphasize in this course about NTP. We talk a lot about configuring your time and date settings in your operating system. We talk about making sure that it's synchronizing to your NTP server. This is why we rely on a proper date and time for so much, not just log files and syncing up the dates and the times on your documents, but also making sure the encryption process is going to work over your network. That is the answer we were looking for, certificate error. File system mismatch would have been a problem if we had perhaps a flash drive with APFS on it that had the file system APFS and we plugged it into a Windows computer. That would be a file system mismatch, which is the file system on one device is not able to read documents stored in a different file system. That's not the problem we had here. The problem here is that the user changed the date and time. File systems did not change, so it would not be that option. 4% of you said a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack. And although we could potentially say that a user changing their date and time might be a denial of service attack, a self-imposed denial of service, it really is not a distributed denial of service, which of course is coming from multiple locations simultaneously. It's distributed across the internet. This is not anything distributed, and it's not a denial of service attack. Therefore, it would not be a DDoS. A SQL injection is another type of attack that takes advantage of primarily web-based applications to be able to access a database without authenticating. That wasn't the problem we were having here. This is one that is a problem with the date and time and not being able to have the encryption work properly to a website. So it probably would not be a SQL injection. And then a Defender false positive. Well, we could certainly have Windows Defender identify a document and say that it has malware inside of it when it really doesn't. But that would not cause our system, the entire browser in our system, to stop working. So that would not be the problem we were looking for either. Would probably not be a Defender false positive. Okay, well, this one is... This one, I think we've come to the conclusion that 75% of us were spot on. You got it absolutely right. Certificate error was the problem, and that 75% of you were absolutely correct. Let's do another question. I'm going to try to squeeze another one in. I'm talking a lot this month in the study group, so I can apologize and I can give you just another couple of questions. We'll work through it that way. How's that sound? This next question asks, at the beginning of each month, all Linux log files are backed up and deleted to save storage space. I guess we can assume it's backing them up and then deleting the ones that aren't backed up. Which of the following would be most likely used to complete this task? Is it batch file, VB script, PowerShell, JavaScript, shell script? Got a few options there. At the beginning of each month, all Linux log files are backed up and deleted to save storage space. Which of the following would be most likely used to complete this task? Is it batch file, VB script, PowerShell, JavaScript, shell script? You think you know the answer? Lock it in at professormesser.com/QA to be able to know what the right answer is and wrong answers are and see if you can lock in what you think the right answer might be. That's where you could go, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will figure out the details of this as we go through. This might be also something to think about. There's obviously a number of different automation functions that you need to know as part of your exam objectives. All 5 of these answers absolutely come from the official exam objective. So if you're looking at any of these and one of them doesn't look quite right, or you're not remembering what that one happens to be, make a note of it so that you can go back and read up a little more on that particular one. Let's go back to the question. Let's see what you came up with as the answer. At the beginning of each month, all Linux log files are backed up and deleted to save storage space. Which of the following would be most likely used to complete this task? Would it be a batch file, VB script, PowerShell, JavaScript, or shell script? We will close our poll, and 64% of you say the answer is shell script. 25% of you say the answer is a batch file. We have 5% that say VB script. We have 4% that say PowerShell, and we have 2% that say JavaScript. I'm seeing a trend here where we have 2 questions, one that's really a lot of people answering, and then a huge chunk answer, and then we've got 3 that are just down in the single digits. Same thing happened with this one as well. So the question we have, 64% of you say the answer is shell script, but then we also have 25% that say batch file. Well, if I was going to do this on my Linux machine with all of my log files, actually I do this on my Linux machine with all of my log files. I actually do this every week with the log files that are on my system, and I use a shell script. Shell script is within the shell of a Linux device, a Linux operating system. We refer to that command prompt of Linux as the shell. In fact, you could run different shells that have different capabilities if you want to. The shell script is incredibly useful for running batch processes, running scripts inside of it. But when we talk about that particular command line in Linux, we always refer to it as the shell. So keep that in mind. If you were to look at a script that's been written in a shell, the very first line starts with a shebang, shebang, shebang. The shebang is a hash bang. The hash bang that's there is one that says to the operating system, this is going to be a script, and you can run it in the shell. And in fact, it tells you right after that which shell you will use to run this particular script. In this case, it is the bash shell. So this is a bash script that is running on the system. So if you are working with Linux, you will probably see quite a few scripts written this way, and it can be very, very useful to running and getting automation inside of your Linux operating system. 25% of you chose batch file, although the process that is occurring in Linux is a script. And you could say, because it is something that is running separately without a human intervention, that it is a batch process. We don't commonly associate that term for Linux. We associate a shell script for Linux. And inside of Windows, we refer to the scripts that run at a Windows command prompt as a batch file. So anytime you see batch file, it's Windows. Anytime you see shell script, it's Linux. And that's why in this case, if you're running Linux log files, you're backing them up and deleting them. Although you could do this on a Windows computer with a batch file, that is probably not going to be the most likely implementation of this particular task. And of course, this question was asking you for the most likely use of this, and it would be almost certainly a shell script running on a Linux machine. Why would you run this on a separate machine when it can run on a local device native to Linux? And all of the other scripting and automation processes here, VBScript is Visual Basic Scripting, a Windows-specific scripting language. PowerShell, another Windows-specific scripting environment, very powerful scripting environment. And JavaScript is one that commonly runs in a browser. We don't normally back up and manage files that are in our operating system from our browser, so that's not what we're going to use either. So we've got a few here that at least give you a chance to think about how information is stored on a computer and how you would interact with those. In this case, Linux was in the question, so we need to focus on Linux. And in this case, the only two that could really be Linux related are JavaScript, which is not Linux specific, but certainly related, and shell script. And shell script is definitely the one that we were looking for as the answer to this particular question. If you did answer this shell script, 64% of you got that one absolutely correct. Now, I know we're past the top of the hour here, but I wanted to fit in one more question if I could. This next question is coming directly from a different source. It comes from a book I wrote called My Core 2 Practice Exams. My Core 2 Practice Exams book was written because I was out on the internet looking for practice questions, and I just never found anything that was the quality and provided me with the information that I really needed to pass the exam. It's hard to find questions that were up to date. It was hard to find questions that were written in the same style and the same tone as the actual exam. And it was difficult to find questions that were even right. It was just wrong, completely incorrect. So what I did was create my own book. And why don't we do a question from my practice exams book? I'm going to bring up my practice exams on the screen here. And I have a question for you. So we've been talking a lot about file systems here. This question's from A67. What page is this on? It's from page 23 of my practice exams book, which as you can see is available in PDF form. I also have a physical edition book flavor of it as well. We have a question that asks, a system administrator is creating a series of shared folders that should not be visible when users browse the network for available resources. What symbol should be added to the end of a share name to provide this functionality? Would it be a period, a $, an exclamation mark, or hash sign? Now, if you know the answer, we're not going to put the answer in the chat room this time. We're instead just think to yourself what you think the answer might be. It's A, B, C, or D. Now, this is a PDF. So if you wanted to do some annotation, maybe you had a stylus you could write on the screen. Maybe there's information that you want to mark in the question itself so that you can maybe highlight that for later. You can certainly do that. One of the great ideas and thoughts around working with these systems is that you're able to have some flexibility with how they work, how they operate. And that's one that can do it. Now, if you want to know if it's A, B, C, or D, that's an easy one. We could simply go to page 33 where it says quick answer. Now we're on page 23. That probably would not be hard to scroll to. But if we wanted a more detailed overview of this question, we go to page 103. Well, that'd be very difficult to scroll the way through and then scroll back. So one of the things that I've done is inside the book itself, I've created hot links. If you simply mouse over the details and click it, it takes you to the page where the answer is. And you can see here that it tells you that the answer is B, $, and you can see why that is the right answer. Probably not too unusual from things you've seen on the internet. One of the problems I have, though, is that I often will get these questions wrong. That's something very common when you're doing practice questions. And a lot of the questions on the internet they tell you why the right answer is right, but they don't tell you why the wrong answer is wrong. And this is a huge opportunity to kind of finish up the learning cycle. How am I supposed to learn from my mistakes if there's nothing there that can tell me why I got it wrong? So inside of my book, every incorrect answer tells you why it is incorrect. So that way, when you get something wrong, it's an opportunity. It's an advantage. You are now learning about why that's the wrong answer, which not only tells you more about that particular topic, but it also tells you a lot about the topic that is the correct answer as well. And I even recommend, if you want, maybe a good idea, even if you get the question right, read through the wrong answers. Each one of these answers in the book come directly from the exam objectives, so you might actually learn more from the question by reading the wrong answers. It's almost like having 4 topics in a single question instead of a single topic in a question. Now, if you read through this question, you didn't understand any of this, I do put a link back to the video that was used to create this question. So you can watch the video, learn a little bit more about the terms, understand more about the topic that we're discussing. Then you can come back and see if you can understand what that question was hoping to get from you. And once we're done with this, I want to go to the next question, but I'm back here on page 103. I need to go back to page 23 or wherever I started. Well, inside of your PDF reader, you probably have a back button. I sure do. So I'll click my back button, and it takes me right back to where I was. So that was easy. I either click the details to go to the details. I can click my back button to go back to where I started. And there we are. That is my practice exams book. They'll have this available in a digital form, also in a physical form. If you purchase the physical edition, you always get the digital edition for no additional cost. So you can download that immediately while you're waiting on the physical book to be mailed to you. You can find out more about it at professormesser.com/core2pe. Well, of course, I mentioned earlier that the exam objectives are a valuable tool for you to use during your studies. What I didn't mention is that they're free. There's no cost associated with downloading these documents. And these are valuable documents, by the way. They tell you everything you need to know about the exam, bullet by bullet by bullet. If you're trying to determine where the different study options are, where you should be focusing your efforts, have you really studied everything you need to know for this exam? This document will tell you. It is a great checklist. So make sure that you have a look at every bullet. You check off whether you know it. You can circle it or highlight it if you don't, and use this as a troubleshooting and training tool. It will tell you when you are ready to take the exam and give you an idea of where you might want to work a little bit harder on different topics. You can go to the CompTIA website or search for it by searching for CompTIA Exam Objectives, or you can use my link that will take you over to the CompTIA website, professormesser.com/objectives. We also do one of these study groups every month. We have a Core 1 and Core 2 study groups already scheduled for May on May 6th and May 8th. I have a Network Plus study group scheduled for May the 15th and a Security Plus study group for May the 21st. But we're not even finished with April. Next week on Wednesday is my Network Plus study group for April, and a week after that will be my Security Plus study group for April. So although I'm showing you May, we still have a lot of things happening here. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, you can always check our calendar, professormesser.com/calendar. You can also find an events calendar in the events channel of our Discord. So if you're already part of our Discord, you've already got access to that calendar with one click of your mouse. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A already. Can you believe it? We just ran right through that one, probably because I talk too much, but we got through a couple. We got through everything I was hoping to get through anyway. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams. They're on our website. You can find it at professormesser.com/1102success. We also have our discounted vouchers if you're in the US or Canada. Why would you pay full price at the CompTIA website? I've got discounts on my website. You can take advantage of those at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, you can find us on your favorite social media. Find us at professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on. Discord, Twitter, X, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, the usuals. You'll find us there. Stick around for our after show. I want to take questions from you. Coming up next, don't go anywhere. Well, this is a good place to stop the first hour, though. Thank you so much for joining us for our interactive Q&A. Thanks for joining us in our second hour, for sticking around, and we will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, that's me. We'll get rid of this. We'll put this here. We'll click this thing, and then we'll do that. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the after show. This is the part of the show where I have not really done any planning. This is the part where I have the smallest amount of work that could be done has clearly been done, because I don't know what your questions are until you put them in. And of course, you can add your questions to this list at any time by visiting that same link that we have been talking about this whole time. You can go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your question. A number of you already have. And if you go to, you'll notice on our main page for Vevox, you'll notice that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. Many of you were submitting questions during the first hour, for example. And I'm going to moderate these questions on my side. So you'll probably not see them pop up on your screen immediately, but you will certainly know that I'll be able to flip through and see the questions on my side, and I'll be able to decide which one of these questions we might want to look at. So let's have a look at some of the things that you were going through and looking at on your system. This is one where if we were going to break down a series of questions from everybody, there is a lot in this list that we can go through. Let's start with a question from one of my favorite people, Anonymous. Anonymous asks, "Hello, Messer." We're doing this, are we? "I'm planning on retaking my Core 2 soon. Not too soon. My Core 2 exam very soon. I want to make sure I pass this time." Yes, we want you to pass as well. "Any tips to improve my chances of passing, aside from reviewing the score sheet?" Well, the score sheet, for those of you not familiar, when you pass your exam or you fail your exam, when you take an exam from CompTIA, at the end of the exam, you can log into your CompTIA account, and there will be a sheet that summarizes your performance on that exam. It will tell you if you pass, it will tell you if you don't pass, and then it will break down for you which topics of the exam objectives you got wrong answers on. So it will tell you you missed a question or more associated with section 1.2, and then they give you the topic of that section. You missed one or more of section 2.4, and they tell you what that topic is. So they don't give you the questions. You don't get the answers. You can't review those after the fact, but it does highlight where you may need to work a little bit more on some of those topics. Now, in the case of Anonymous, sounds like you're already aware of the score sheet. You said, "I've already gone through that. We're good." I think at this point, there's two places that really will help you. The first is, I really think you should get some very good practice exams, practice questions, especially questions that might give you more of a style and a form of the actual exam, because they do have a unique way, shouldn't say unique way, but a very formal way of asking questions on the exam that very often people are not expecting. I think a lot of people walk into the exam thinking they'll get a question like, "What does DHCP stand for?" They're never going to ask a question like that. You'll never get a gimme trivia question like that one. They are always going to be more of a scenario type question. Here's a thing that happened. How can we fix this thing? Or what is the best way? Or what is the next thing you should do? Those are the types of questions you get on the exam. So having some familiarity with that will help. Now, Anonymous has already gone through this exam, so now they're probably familiar with that, which now leaves us with the second best option I have for you. And we just talked about this one. This is clearly the best checklist for your exam. If you can go through the official CompTIA exam objectives and use these as a checklist. For example, let's just start at section 1. They call them domains. So section 1.0 is operating systems. Section 1.1 is identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. And they tell you about Windows 10 editions, Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. They tell you about feature differences. You have to know the difference between domain access versus a workgroup. We have to know what desktop styles / user interface feature differences might be. We have to know what the differences are between these editions with the availability of the remote desktop protocol and so on. Now, if you can describe those differences to yourself or to someone else, you can check that one off your list. If you cannot describe those differences to yourself or someone else, circle that one, highlight it, color it like I have, and you can go back to that topic. But go through this entire set of exam objectives. There are hundreds of objectives in this list. You're not going to know all of them, but maybe you get to 90 to 95% of them. I think you would be in pretty good shape for your exam. If you did 100%, it would be obviously ideal because they could ask you about any of these topics. And what's nice about CompTIA is they stick very, very, very close to this list. They're very unusual for them to go off the set of these topics, which means if you know 100% of these topics, you're going to pass your exam. I'm very sure of it. You can get your hands on these official exam objectives. Go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to the download page, or you can use the link that is on my site, professormesser.com/objectives. And I've got a link that will take you over to the CompTIA site where you can download those. They may ask you for personal information when you get there. Give us your name, your email address, etc. It's up to you on how you want to approach that. But fill that out, get that information, click the download link, and you'll have the exam objectives that you can use. I think that is one of the most valuable tools for your studies. This should be the first thing you download and read through before you start doing any other studies. It should be the last thing you reference as a checklist before you're ready to book your exam. So this is a beginning, middle, and end type of function, and you should absolutely take advantage of that. Hopefully that's given you some ideas, anonymous, for being able to work through that. Hopefully that might give you some tips. And of course, you can always send us another question if you have a follow-up or anything else you would like to ask about that. Let's keep going through this list. We've got more questions that you have sent in. There were a couple on here I'm going to skip over because I'm just not sure what you were asking. There were some that I think were added in sort of a haphazard form. So if I don't address your question, you may want to resubmit that as we are going through this list. Oh, we've got other questions that have come through. This is another good one because it's something that's top of mind for me. Again, from my good friend Anonymous. And Anonymous says, "Hi, Professor. I'm taking my 1102 this weekend and looking ahead to future learning. My one issue has been that I do not have extra money to get equipment for home labs." Solidarity. What would you recommend for someone who wants to get hands-on with new systems but doesn't have the resources to buy new stuff? Well, that's a pretty good question, I think. And if you are someone who is very particular about spending money, you want to spend money in the right way, but you do not want to spend money in the wrong way, and that's assuming you have any money to spend, always a concern as well. How do you study for this exam? There are a couple of ways you can step through that. There's quite a few things you can do to help with that. One is a lot of the things that you can do on a local computer, especially for the 1102, the Core 2 exam. It's a very Windows-centric exam. So a lot of the command lines, a lot of the networking information you need to know, a lot of the information that's in the Windows control panel, the administrative tools, the utilities, you can do those all on your native computer. You don't need anything extra for that. A lot of people will also want to work a lot with Linux or Mac OS, especially since there are a lot of command lines, Linux command lines on the exam. You might want to, Linux is free, but how do you run it if you don't have another computer? Well, the obvious answer would be to virtualize it. Virtualization is a great way to take advantage of your local computer, maybe running Windows, and be able to run Linux inside of your Windows desktop. That desktop-based virtualization can be very, very powerful. You've already seen some of that with me today because on my computer, I brought up that Windows machine. Let's see, I have it right. Where did I put it? I have way too many machines on my computer. So this was a virtual machine. I'm running Mac OS back here, and I've just slid a Windows right on top of it. So this is a virtualized Windows environment. I could even make it a smaller window if I want to. It'll change over the graphics there in a second. It'll figure it out. I got a lot going on now on my desktop. So right here is my Windows machine, and it's running. It's an active Windows configuration. And behind this is a Mac OS that's running. I could bring up other operating systems at the same time as well. So I could run Windows here. I can run a Linux on this side. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to bring up a test server that I have for Linux. Hopefully it's working. So here's a Linux machine, an older CentOS that I've got. So this is running Linux, Windows, and Mac OS all on the same computer, all on the same machine, and just running as virtual machines inside of it. Now, the downside of this, of course, is that if you're doing a lot with these virtual machines, you have to have enough memory to be able to run all of these at the same time. You need to have enough storage space to store all of these separate operating systems. But these days on our laptops, our desktop computers, memory is relatively inexpensive. There's obviously a cost associated with it, but the cost of RAM has really dropped. And usually we have a lot of storage on our system, certainly enough to run a basic Linux operating system. So you could get Linux running, and then you can use that to step through all of the commands that are there. And you can run them all at the same time. In fact, you could have your Windows talk to your Linux and back and forth. You could transfer files between them. You could see if you can share documents between them. You can try a trace route in Windows and try a trace route in Linux. Is there a difference? There's a lot happening there. I'm running CentOS Stream on this particular one, but I probably have 6 or 7 different Linux distributions over here on my other screen that you're not going to see. So there's Ubuntu. I've got a Kali. I've got a Fedora. I've got Debian. I've got an Alma. There's a lot of things happening here on this other screen. They're not running right now, but they are separate operating systems. So that's one thing that you can do now that saves a lot of money. The other thing you might want to do if you're trying to do things that are more network related or related to other operating systems, you can also run different applications in those virtual environments. And so that's another thing you might want to consider doing. There's some great ideas for home labs. I have a video it's listed in the YouTube video description of this video called How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience. And that video goes through scenarios where you could set up a virtualized firewall and configure it and connect it to your network and watch data flowing through it and produce reports on it, all running in a virtual environment. There's no cost to do that at all. So that's a really good example of saving money in an environment where you really don't have a lot. Well, as it turns out, you have a lot more power and a lot more capability than you may have realized just by virtualizing everything. And it's one that I think comes in very handy, especially if you have different operating systems and different things that you're working through. Hopefully, give you a little familiarity with that and work through. Plus, you learn virtualization. If you've never done virtualization on your desktop, that in itself is remarkable. So make sure you're familiar with the options here. Tons of options inside of it, tons of different things that you could be configuring. You can set up different CPU parameters. You can change the way the network operates. There's a lot that you can do in this virtual world. So have a look at it, see if that's something you might want to do. We do have time for some more questions. So let's go through this list. If you would like to add a question to our list, you can simply follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and we can absolutely have a look at those. Let's see if other questions that you might have submitted and other things that you have on this list. We do have some other things that are on this list. Some folks have made comments that you have sent in, not really a question, but people have said, Maxwell wrote and said, you passed your A+, your core 1 back in February and your core 2 in March. So if I'm sure, Maxwell, you're probably in the chat. Congratulations on your new A+. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. And if you have thoughts, comments, and tips for others, stick it in the chat. I think others obviously don't tell us what was on your exam, but you probably have. Give us your number one tip. If you were going to take this exam, these 2 exams right now, what would that be? We'll see what comes up in that list. Let's keep going through your questions that you have submitted. There's quite a few here that we could go through. Here is a popular question that has come in quite a bit over this last week or so, because as I mentioned earlier, CompTIA we're in this 6-month overlap period now where you could either take the 1101 and 1102 exam, or you could take the 1201 and 1202 exam. Both of those will get you your A+ certification. Doesn't matter which pair you take, but you have to pick one or the other. Obviously, the 1101 and 1102 will retire on the 25th, and that's the question that is posed by our good friend Anonymous again, who asks, if I was to start studying for my CompTIA A+ now, will I be able to get it done before the retirement of the 1101 and 1102? I would say the vast majority of you would easily be able to finish your studies if you started now. You've got 6 months to complete both the 1101 and 1102. And the average on these is around 2 months, sometimes 3. So you're still in that time frame of fitting it into that 6-month period. But 1101 and 1102 are still going to be around. You have until September 25th. That's a long time from now. It's all summer. You've got it even a little bit into the fall. So you've got a lot of time before we ever get to that time frame. Now, some of you may be concerned about that, though, because what if something happens in your world and you've taken one of these? Maybe you took the 1101 and passed it. Well, now you have to finish the 1102 before it retires. So there is a deadline here. I get it. There is a drop dead date where you can no longer take them. And if you passed one of these exams and you don't pass the other one before September 25th, you have to start over. So that's not what we want either. So there is a scheduling thing that I can't answer for you. And I don't know your time frame. I don't know how much time you have to study during the day. I don't know the things that are going to be happening in your life. That is a challenge. So make sure you look at your calendar, you figure out what makes the most sense, and you can decide whether you go with the 1100 series exams or if you're going to go with the 1200 series exams. Either way, you're going to be able to be A+ certified, and your certification will be good for 3 years. So that gives you at least an idea of things to worry about. It's always a challenge when there are options available. Just make sure you look at the time frame. Right now, there is a vastly more study materials available for the 1100 series exam, which is another reason I highly encourage you to stick with that 1100 series right now. But as we go through the next month or two, usually 3 months, everything starts to even out a bit. And after 3 months or so of this exam being out, we can pretty much say, yeah, we can shift over to the new version at that point. This is something that happens every time there's a new version released. We go through the same overlap period every time. We have the same concerns about timing. So it's nothing new. We just have to make sure we manage our time properly to be able to do that. Let's keep going through the list of questions along the same lines, since we are taking questions about this. This question asks, do you plan on phasing out the 1101 and 1102 in favor of the 1201? Well, no, that doesn't make much sense, does it? There will be people taking their 1101 and 1102 exams up until September 25th. I assure you, I've done this many times. We've gone through this overlap period many, many times. So when we went from the 600 to 700, the 700 to 800, the 800 to 900, the 900 to 1,000, the 1,000 to 1,000 to 1,100, now we're doing it the 6th time from the 1100 to the 1200 series. So we don't ever phase anything out because all of that information is valuable on the 1101 and 1102 for people that are taking those exams all the way up to September the 25th. So 6 months from now. One of the things you'll notice, though, is I even don't remove the videos at that point. You can still go out to our YouTube channel and look at our 600 series course if you wanted to. I'd really recommend you don't. But you could if you wanted to. Obviously, if you're big on Windows NT and Windows XP, that's the course for you. But I will keep those videos always available. So you can always go back and either see what a horrible job we did with them, or there might be a little bit of information that was dropped and maybe you want to go reference that information. It's always valuable. So I never phase anything out. Instead, I create a new course. So there's a new 1201 and 1202 course that is being deployed to YouTube effectively as we speak. You can see that just in the last week, I think we've uploaded 15 or 18 videos. They're going up there quick. And I've got another 10 or so that I'm hoping to get up there today or over the next couple of days. So there's a lot that we're just putting a lot of content out there right now. And you'll find a brand new 1201 course and a 1202 course. They're all there and available. The idea behind this, I'll show you this detail. Here we go. This is the chart that shows that time frame. So the life cycle of the 1101 and 1102 are here. It was released on April the 20th of 2022, and it will be available until September 25th of 2025. And you can see March 25th is when the 1201 and 1202 are released. So this is your overlap period right here. This is 6 months. That tiny little 1 inch on your screen is 6 months of time to make that happen. So the 6 months, once we hit September 25th, the only A+ exams that will be available will be the 1201 and the 1202. And then once we get closer to the April timeframe of 2028, we'll have another line in our Gantt chart here for, I don't know, the 1301 and 1302, whatever they call the next one. Someday, 3 months from now. Don't worry about it now. We don't have to worry about the 1300 series right now. Didn't mean to say that. Now, the question you had is, has much changed? What's interesting about this is that usually when there is an update to the exams, that update is usually 30% or so of the exam is new. But if you think back 3 years when this exam was released, during that time when the 1100 series exam was released and now, we effectively shut down the world. There was that COVID thing that happened, you may recall. And when that occurred, all development really stopped on Windows. And because of that, the version of Windows that was available when the 1100 series was released is identical to the version of Windows that's available when the 1200 series was released. There was not an update to Windows like there normally would be between exam versions. That means that if you were to look at the differences between the 1101 and the 1201, the number of new objectives on the 1201 out of the 391, 49. So only 13% of the objectives on the 1201 exam are new from the 1101. And the total amount of information that was dropped, which is this yellow little moon piece here, is 15% of the 1101 objectives don't appear on the 1201. That's why I always tell you, make sure you study from materials that match the version of the exam you're going to take, because you don't want to study 1101 and then go take the 1201. You've studied 15% of that exam that you'll never see on the 1201 exam, and you're missing 13% of what's new. That's enough to fail, by the way. So you don't want to do that. The green part in the middle is what's stayed the same. 87% of the exam is exactly the same. So that's a remarkable difference, and we should take advantage of that. That at least gives us a little bit more of comfort knowing that if we do have to change in midstream, the change is not going to be dramatic, at least not for the 1101 and the 1201. What about the 1102 and the 1202? There it is. Here's the same diagram, except we've now taken the stats for the 1102 and the 1202. This one's a little bit different. Still 15% of the objectives were dropped. We still have a little sliver that was dropped from the 1102. The 1202, though, has more new material. You can see 18% of the objectives are new, but still 18%, not super large, not a huge number based on previous changes, which means everything in the middle, 80% of the exam, contains similar information. But still 80%, you can't count on that 80%. That's still enough to fail. You have to make sure the materials that you're using are really specific to the exam that you are taking. So if you're studying for the 1102, make sure all your materials say 220-1102. If you plan on taking the 1202, make sure all your materials are specifically written for the 1202. And yes, there are also refreshes every 3 years for Network Plus and Security Plus, but they are at different times and different years. So we recently, a couple years ago, we had the Security Plus update. Last year, we had Network Plus. This year, we have A Plus. So we really have more than a year before Security Plus is updated again. That will be the next update over a year from now. So we've got quite a bit of time before anything like that happens. So that is what I have here. I don't plan on, as mentioned, I don't plan on phasing out anything. I just add to the list. And hopefully now you know what has changed and what is not. I have a document, by the way, on my website that details exactly which topics are dropped from the exam and what topics are new. So you can go out to the Professor Messer website, and on the index page, I have that list so you can see those. Plenty to go through. Let's keep going through questions that you have submitted. One moment, please. I'll go through your list, see if I can break out what these happen to be. I'm clicking buttons on my side. Next on here. So here's a good example of this. People are even asking about changes. So the 1101 exam, if you go back to the 1000 series exam, the 1001 and the 1002, there were topics on that exam that don't appear on the 1101 and 1102. And Anonymous even asked about that and says, hey, I know the 1101 exams don't include Zigbee or Z-Wave anymore. With the increased use of smart devices, do you know why it was removed? Well, it was probably removed because ultimately we never deal with that. Interestingly, I think, was it Zigbee that finally came out on top? We don't even think about which one won in this Internet of Things networking, the mesh networking used for our Internet of Things devices. And what you may have even found is that we're seeing kind of an increased use of 802.11 instead of the Zigbee or the IoT-related meshing protocols and networking methods. So that's why it was removed. You just never run into it. And it would be more valuable for you to learn about RAID and Windows troubleshooting than it would be to know about the internals of an IoT device that ultimately you will never see anyway. That's more of a developer thing than anything else. And CompTIA tends to do that. They tend to take topics that they think are going to be popular and they put it in the exam objectives. And then as those topics become less important in the industry, they are removed from the exams, which is what we want, really. But that's why in the latest version of the exams, you don't have things like phablets, P-H-A-B-L-E-T-S, phablets. There was one time where we were all talking about phablets. Don't talk about phablets anymore. So it was dropped. So that's why they do that. Now, there's other things that I think they focus on. This is all pure conjecture, by the way, because I am not involved with the writing of these exams. I'm not involved in the planning of these exams, nor do I want to be. So this is just what I have sort of gathered based on what I see the change is. Because whenever I get a new set of exam objectives, I take every objective, they go into a spreadsheet, I effectively perform a diff against both of those to determine what has been dropped, what has been added, what are the differences, is there a different structure, are they getting rid of entire sections, or are they really just pruning out individual topics that are no longer applicable? So you can start to see what's happening in their minds when they were putting these objectives together. So that's why I mention and I tell you about, that's why I create those Venn diagrams. That's why I detail what has been dropped and what has been added. So there's no question as to what the differences really were with that exam. And I think that's important if you're studying or trying to figure out what you're going to do with these exams. It would be useful to know. Now, why did they drop it? Sometimes it's obvious. They dropped it because we're not talking about that technology anymore. Phablets are no longer a thing. We also are running into situations where we put it in the exam thinking that we're going to know about Z-Wave, we're going to need to know about Zigbee, and then it turns out that those technologies, one turned out to be a primary over the other, and we never have to worry about compatibility with them anymore, and we never even think about it anymore. So that's another reason, is that sometimes some of these technologies just sort of fade away. And a lot of that happened on the 1201 too. There's a lot of technologies that were on the 1101 and the 1102 that are not on the 1201 or 1202. It's just a normal part of the 3-year cycle of updating these exams, and it's a good thing. That's what we want in these exams. We want them to be up to date. We want them to have things that are top of mind, and we want them to include things that we would find in a normal data center. And not every data center is running the latest version of every operating system. You're going to find older operating systems, older hardware, older systems that you will still be supporting. And so the A+ exam is all about providing you with here's what's new, but we also have to support what's also been here for a while. Let's keep going through your list of questions. We have more on this list. Let's see what else is listed there. There's quite a bit in here. This is really a lot of questions that I'm getting about the exams themselves are some very specific and very good questions coming through. So let me find a good one that you have worked through. We talked early, before I get to that, just to finish up our conversation about timeframes with the exam. We did have a question that came in from Ruben who asked, if someone passes Core 1, let's say the 220.11.01 specifically, and fails to pass the 220.11.02 by September, will they have to retake? So let me be sure everybody's aware of this, because this is an important consideration. These exams are a pair. They are from the same series of exams are tied to each other. So the 1101 and 1102 are a pair that are tied to each other. The 1201 and 1202 are a completely different pair that are tied to each other. And notice they are on different hands. They are separated from each other. You cannot take Core 1 from one set and Core 2 from the other set and have an A+. It doesn't work that way. They're separated. They have to be on the same one. In fact, if you go to the CompTIA website, for those of you wondering, well, how do we know that? How do we know for sure? I'm going to go to the certification section of the CompTIA website and have a look at, this is the A+ section. And I'm going to go down to the exam details. Just scrolls down here. So it tells you, here is the 1101 and 1102 and what you need to know. Here's the 1201 and 1202 and what you need to know. And they tell you for the 1101 and 1102, candidates must complete both the 1101 and 1102 to earn certification. I guess that's one way to say it. Exams cannot be combined across the series. Well, gosh, is it the same way for the 1201 and 1202? Let's have a look. Candidates must complete both the 1201 and 1202 to earn certification. Exams cannot be combined across the series. So there's your documentation on the CompTIA website that is indeed telling you you cannot take 1101 and 1202. You cannot take 1102 and 1201. Those are different editions. Those are different exam series, and you cannot mix and match those. You must pass both exams from the same series. Super, super, super important. Make sure you keep that in mind, because that will be important. You do not want to take one and then miss your window. So as I mentioned, the calendar and time management is oh so important. So make sure you do that. Let's keep going through your list. A lot of great questions coming in, by the way. Thank you for the questions that you are submitting. I've got there's a lot of questions that have come in. So thank you for doing that. Here's one. Well, this is more of an inside baseball question, but sometimes these are good. Enough about you. Let's talk about me. This is from Justin, who asks, hi, Professor Messer. Do you have any plans to create content for any other CompTIA or other vendor certifications? Thanks again for all you do. Do I have plans? I got lots of plans. Plans I got plans galore. I got plans upon plan upon plan that I have a huge list. I have a constant list of certifications that I would love to create training courses for. The real challenge when you're creating these is that anytime you create a course or any series of courses, especially a course from scratch, you're talking about a 3, probably more like a 6-month investment. So there has to be an open calendar of 6 months for you to be able to do that. So, but there's lots of great exams out there. There are some great AWS exams I'd love to do. There's some great Cisco exams I'd love to do, some great Microsoft exams, some Linux-based exams. I got a big list of exams. I got a huge planning of things that we could roll out. And we've also considered maybe we should start bringing in and using content created by others. We could bring in a whole team of folks and create tons of courses. But then I think if you start looking at the logistics of that, I think it would naturally lose quality. I think there's a concern there about quantity is one thing, but what we have always relied on for our training materials is a high quality. I want our training materials to be the best of what you are finding. Now, style is a different question. Maybe the style of how we present things you like, great, on the Professor Messer website. Maybe other people like a style from someone else. I can't emulate style. I can only control quality. And so if you're looking at my training courses, my videos, my course notes, my practice exams, they are, nobody's perfect, but I think you'll find overall the level of focus on the exam objectives is better than anything else you will find on the market. I can say that 100% of the case. I think we have the most on-topic exam content in our video series, the most on-topic content in our practice exams, by far in our practice exams. And I'm very proud of that. And so I don't want to lose that. So anytime we talk about adding more to it with other courses, that's always a concern. So it doesn't mean we won't do it, but I have to keep that in mind. I want to be sure that anything new we do, that we're able to put the same level of quality into it. And things like Cisco or Microsoft or AWS, those would be fun to do. Those are right in my wheelhouse. Been working with those technologies for years and years and years and years. So that would be great to be able to work through those. So that's why you may not have seen. Plus, there might be things that we could add on to the existing courses that we have that even improve the study even further. So I have not just plans for new courses. I have plans for my existing courses. So we've got other things there to think about. It's not a simple question to answer. There's a lot of moving parts there. There's a lot of variability. There are a lot of things to consider. There's never a perfect answer for any of them, but in a perfect world, I would love to create a lot more courses. It's more about, it's a time motion study at this point. Can we do it and still sleep? Who knows? Let's find out. We'll have to see that from those perspectives. So let's talk about this pull and push about the 1200 series and the 1100 series and which one we want to do. Anonymous says, I want to start studying now. To be safe, I want to go with the 1200 series of the test. It's perfectly reasonable. Question from Anonymous is, what study material can I use for the 1200 series exams? Ah, there's your rub. Could I use your 1100 series objectives? You sort of could, because we've seen that the differences are we drop 15% from the old, we add 13% to the new. We drop 15% to the old, we add 18% to the new. The differences are relatively minor, but they still are differences, and they still have a significant effect on what you would need to study. But as time goes on, there will be more materials available for the 1200 series. I already showed you, we already have 1200 series course notes. I have 1200 series course notes without having a 1200 series course. How did that work? Well, that's because we already have written the course. I have been doing something over these last few months, and that's writing courses. And you will notice if you go over to professormessor.com, go to the website, you'll notice that in the top main menu, indeed, there is an option for the 220-1201 Core 1 videos. And of course, there's all our new videos right here. Laptop hardware, connecting mobile devices. We got quite a few that are already out there. So you could be watching this. You could be studying for the 1200 series right now. We got all those videos there. And if you want to know the differences, I have an article right here at the top. What's new in the 1201 exam? You can click here and you get a breakdown. These should look familiar. There's the Gantt chart you saw earlier. Here's the Venn diagram you saw earlier. Bring it up, have a look at that again. And I told you that I document everything that's different. So if you've already been studying for the 1100 and you're thinking, I'm going to shift over to the 1200, here's what's different. So here's what's dropped from the 1201, from the 1101 to the 1201. And here's what's added to the 1201 that is brand new. You'll see a lot of these have no new topics. No new topics. Here's what's been added in section 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. But notice section 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, nothing new. That kind of makes sense. It's 18%. Actually, on this one, yes, 18% is new. So that's about 18% if we look at it. And then I got a breakdown of things you can do to help study. They're all in here. That is my difference. If you're trying to figure out what study materials out there, there's relatively little right now, quite honestly, but that's normal 1-2 weeks after the release of a new exam. Perfectly normal type of thing. If you were to wait 2 months, 3 months, ideally, that would be the time to really dive into the 1200 series, because at that point, practically all publishers will have their materials out in the market. Some will come a little bit later, but I would say the bulk of what you will find is in the next 2 to 3 months, everything will be there. In the meantime, you could use the 1100 series, but remember, 15% of that's been dropped. You're going to be learning things that you won't need to know. And there's 18 to 20%, 20%, 13 to 18% are things that are brand new that aren't in the old videos. So, but we're getting our videos out very, very, very quickly. You may find that by the time you're ready to watch them, I've already put out 20 plus videos, and I'm going to keep putting them out every couple of days. We're probably going to be able to keep up with you pretty well. So you've got some options. Look at the calendar, see what makes sense for you. At this point, if you're looking at the 1200 series, you're just going to have to wait for the world to catch up to you, because when these exams first come out, it takes time to build these courses. It takes time to create the practice exams. It takes time to create the course notes. It takes time to do all of this. So we are working on this 7 days a week. I work probably 15-hour days. So that's a lot for an entire week to get all this content done. But if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. So this is just like accountants have a busy time right now because it's tax time in the US. This is the busy time for us. It's content time. It's course time. And that's once it's all over, okay, we can go back to a normal life. But right now, nothing is normal for that. So for those of you also sending messages and saying, well, do you have any material? Yep, you just saw some of it for the 1200 series. And there will be a lot more coming for the 1200 series. Do not worry. We'll cover everything that is listed in those exam objectives, as we always do. We have a complete, comprehensive course that covers every single bullet from the official exam objectives. We leave nothing out. So that's by design. Let's keep going through the list of things that you have. Let me refresh my questions that are here. I'm running very short of time, so I want to squeeze a couple in here before we get into this list. This is one I'm going to use this question and sort of use it as a broader question about this one. This is from Cleaford, who asks, I'm planning to go past the Network Plus. How long should I give myself before getting the exam? This is one of those questions where there's not an answer, because every single person is different. Every single person has a different background in networking, in operating systems, in security, whatever the exam is you're taking. Everybody studies differently. Everybody has a different amount of time during the day that they can study. Everybody has a different style of study. So it takes different amount of time to learn one particular topic from one person than it might from someone else. There's just too many variables involved to be able to know how long should it really take. Now, I will tell you broadly that the exam objectives, or for most people taking an A+, a Network Plus, or a Security Plus exam, the average tends to be 2 to 3 months per exam. So for Network Plus, 2 to 3 months is the average. But there are some people that are very familiar with networking that need to get that certification because their boss told them they need to have it. Well, they're already network experts. They're going to read the exam objectives, and in about a week, they'll go in and take the exam. That's pretty unusual. And you don't find that very often. And quite honestly, it's not really a good example of someone learning the content because they already know the content. But there are people that do that. You see them on the internet all the time. I had barely studied and passed my exam in a week. Well, yeah, but you're Cisco certified already. Of course you passed your Network Plus exam in a week. Why did it take a week is really the question. That took too long for you. You should have taken a day. You shouldn't have even had to study. You could have walked right in. So those are those situations. But for most people, 2 to 3 months. For someone like me, I really like to know the content. Whenever I start diving into these technology topics, I really like to know a lot about them. So I'll read a book about it. I'll watch more videos on it. I'll perform a lab that's specific to that technology. I'll run commands at the command line. I'll do whatever I need to do to dive in a little bit deeper so that I really, really, really understand how these technologies are laid out. And that's just my style. Other people just want to know the basic overview that they need to know to pass the exam, and they're on their way. I want to spend a little more time. So for someone like me, it might take 4 months. It might take 6 months. It might take longer depending on the exam and how much time I have for myself. So you never know exactly how long I can tell an individual, here's how long it will take you. It will take you 3 weeks and 6 days and you'll be ready to take the exam. I can't do that. I can't look into their brain. I can't figure out based on their schedule. It's very unique from person to person. All we can really go with is the averages. So hopefully that gives you an idea. I think 2 to 3 months is a good time frame to work on, to kind of focus on. And as you go through the objectives and just take it a section at a time, you'll start to see how quickly the material's going. You may see that this takes like a week per objective, week per section to get this one done. Well, you count the number of sections and it's going to be 4 months. Or you may find that you're able to get through a section every night. All right, well, you might be ready in 3 weeks. So you've got some options and things you can work on and ways that you can help get a good barometer of where you fit into the whole study process. In fact, you might write out an entire study program with each section and how long you think it will take you. So create your own project plan for your study. And then you'll be able, once you put it all in, you could see at the end of that, how long does it take? So if you've got any familiarity with doing projects at any level, you're probably familiar with that chart. Do another Gantt chart just like I did, but do it for your studies and break all of that apart. Let's keep going through the list of questions that you have. A lot of good stuff coming in, by the way. Thank you for sending these. I want to fit one more. I know we're at the top of the hour. I want to see if I can fit one more into this list. And this is a nice adjunct to that Network Plus question. This is from Andy, who asks, are your Network Plus Inten 009 videos in order from the objectives for this exam? So this is a good thing to discuss. If you've never seen our training courses before, you may not be completely aware of this. So I'm going to show you this example since we're on the A+ study group. Let's look at the A+ videos because it's the same for every one of these courses. And I'm going to bring up my exam objectives. So we'll do 1102. So here's the 1102 objectives there for the 220 1102. And I'm going to go the first section, operating systems. We just saw this earlier. Identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. This is the 220 1102. So along those lines, I'm going to bring up the Professor Messer website, go to the homepage of the site. And on the homepage of this site, we're going to go to the 1102 because those were the objectives I was just looking at. And I'm going to choose the first option for the free 220 1102 Core 2 A+ videos. So here's the Core 2 course. Now, the first section, Section 1, Operating Systems. I'm going to quickly flip back. Hey, Section 1.0 in the exam objectives is Operating Systems. Oh, okay. The first one is Microsoft Windows, an overview of Windows. Windows includes a number of different editions and requirements. In this video, you'll learn about Windows 10 Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. Wait a second. Section 1.1, Windows 10 editions, Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. Wait, it's exactly the same. In fact, in the same order as well. The next part of this is feature differences, and we did domain versus workgroup, desktop styles, RDP, RAM. Well, let's go back to the index. The next section is Windows features. Windows device at work includes a different set of features than the Home edition. In this video, you'll learn about domain services, remote desktop protocol, BitLocker, EFS, group policy, and more. There it is. So these match perfectly with the things we'll be doing. And lastly, in the 1.1 upgrade paths, in-place upgrade is specifically mentioned. And look, we have a video on Windows upgrades. Moving from one Windows version to another can require some planning. This video, you'll learn about Windows upgrade options and how to manage the upgrade process. There it is. So we have linked together perfectly the exam numbers, the objective numbers from the official exam objectives. We've added every single objective into a series of videos that are listed in each section. And once you're done, go to section 1.2, Windows commands. Guess what? Section 1.2, given a scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft command line tool. And we have Windows commands and we have networking commands. They're sort of bundled in with each other because ipconfig and ping are in here, but netuse and copy are also in here. So one of the things I did in my videos was make this a little bit easier because I broke it up into two separate videos, one for the Windows command line and then another one for the Windows network command line. But we cover everything. We cover all of the topics across both of them. And if you go drill down into any one of these, you can watch the video. And one of the things that if you've never been to my site to watch the videos, the entire transcript is listed underneath the video itself. So you could always follow along, or if English is not your first language, this is a great prompt so that you can sort of follow along with what did he say? What does that mean? What word was he saying? Oh, it was background, because you could say in the background. Oh, that's what he said. So it's another great way to kind of track what's going on the screen. And the same transcript is part of the closed captioning. I've the volume turned off here. But if I turn on closed captioning, the closed captioning that is on the videos is the same text. It's not YouTube's text, it's my text. I had someone watch this video and do the entire transcript. This is a human-created transcript, not a computer-created transcript. And the entire transcript, all of those are added as, they start as closed captioning. And all I did was rip the closed captioning out and I stuck it underneath the video here as a transcript. And so that's why you'll notice that our closed captions are very accurate, much more accurate than what YouTube commonly does with their automated process, although YouTube's gotten better lately. But I find the most accurate is always going to be human generated. That's just sort of how that goes. So you can turn on the closed captioning and get the same thing in real time with the video that's in front of you and what you're using. So that might help, especially if English is your second language. That might come in handy. That might be something that will be important for you. So take advantage of those. Those resources are available for all of our videos. That's how you know where you can find things. Not every book and every other course is in the same format as the official exam objectives. However, you'll find many books will cross-reference a chapter with the exam objective numbers that are covered in that chapter, which makes it very easy for you to now go back to our site, find the exact section that is listed in your book, and watch the videos associated with that. So there might be something easy to make that happen. And there's, of course, other resources, not just the website, but you've also got some folks in the chat room. We're talking about our Discord. It is a public Discord. You can, of course, join it at any time by going to professormesser.com/Discord. So plenty to see there. There's no cost. There's no nothing put up in the way. You don't have to register other than having a Discord account. That's all you need. And if you already have a Discord account, then all you need to do is click the join button and you're in. You don't have to hop through any hoops. There's nothing you have to sign up and do. You don't have to send me a picture or give me a special code or some of these other crazy things that I've had to do to join other Discords. Ours is very, very open. I don't want to get between you and learning the content. So I try to make things as easy to get to as possible. And if I can limit how much information you have to provide and how many things you have to register for and how many other things are there, let's just make it as easy as possible, shall we? Should be an important part of this. And I think, looking at the clock, before I go through another question, I think that is probably a good place to be, because we have indeed gone over time a little bit on this one, but hopefully that's okay with you. These are always great events to do because there's some interactivity. We get to talk to each other. We get to have conversations in the chat room. You can have conversations also with others. And we get to learn a little something about the topics that are from our A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus exams. And of course, we're going to do another one of these next week. If you're studying for Network Plus, coming back Wednesday of next week, we have our Network Plus study group. And if you're watching this video and we're way past that time frame, you can always check our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar to know exactly when the next live event is going to be. We'd love to have you join us. That's where we have the most fun, is putting together these live events for you. Otherwise, we'll be over on our Discord. We'd love to see you there. Join us at professormesser.com/discord. You can always send me a note also from my website. Either go to the top or the bottom and click the Contact Us link. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.